One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The answer, my friend, is the answer is
That would be an honor. Go ahead, Mr. President. This is Houston out.
The year was 1969. What a strange year it was. America was reaching for the stars and searching for peace. At the same time, missions that were worlds apart. Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin and... Well, it was 25 years ago, and you always wonder, you know, where was I at certain times in history? When the Apollo 11 landed on the moon, I was in the Oval Office at the White House with Richard Nixon. And I was a television consultant at that time, and I was asked to set up the joint communications coordinated between the networks and the men on the moon. Somewhere, and I tried to dig them up for this show, but I couldn't find it, there are actual pictures of me in the Oval Office that night as I watched the men land on the moon. I was a little thinner in those days. You wouldn't recognize me, but it was actually me. I can prove that, as a matter of fact. Actually, Nixon, they didn't know where the astronauts were going to be on the moon, and my guest will enjoy this. So the president was behind the desk in the Oval Office, and if he looked to the right, he might be standing on one of the astronauts. The astronauts, when they brought them up on a split screen, might be standing right on top of Nixon's face. So they asked me how to solve it, and I put a monitor on each side of the desk, and at the last minute, we saw where the astronauts were standing, and I cued the president to the monitor on the other side so that he was facing the astronauts on the screen. Otherwise, they might have both been looking off. Little inside trivia of what actually happened at our end. What we were doing was a lot less dangerous and a lot less momentous than what was actually happening up there. With me tonight is Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin. Buzz, nice to have you with me.
Thanks, Roger. It's great to be here.
Buzz, 25 years. Are you happy about where we are today, or are you disappointed about where we are on the space program?
I think all of us who were part of the space program feel that we could have continued on a bit more with the lunar excursions. We know how short we were on the ability to supply additional Saturn V's. But in retrospect, it just doesn't seem right for a nation that put together such a remarkable team to land 6 out of 7 times successfully, do so much, and then after a few missions where we used that equipment to then stand down for almost 6 full years until another American flew in space. That just doesn't seem consistent to me.
What happened? Did we lose our national will? Jack Kennedy was a big proponent of the space program back in the early 60s. Was he really the driving force that made it happen, or what happened?
Well, I left the space program as one of the things that happened. No, I'm just kidding.
Why did you leave?
Well, I left because I felt it was time to maybe move back to the service that I came from. I was very proud of my service in the Air Force, combat flying in Korea, and I wanted to go back and see if I could be useful to the service with the experience that I'd learned in the civil space program. I wasn't too satisfied with the assignment that they finally came up for me, so I stayed about a year and then retired both from NASA and the Air Force.
Buzz, I know you as a great American, and we've had dinner, and we know each other pretty well. Are there times that people in the space program today think maybe you're a pain in the neck because you say the truth, you tell them what's on your mind, you tell them what they ought to be doing, they don't want to hear that?
I'm sure you hit the nail on the head. I'm an outsider, and I call it the way I see it. I look at the long range, the vision. The space program is my hobby. I mean, it's my life. I put so much into it, yet it's not where I earn my living, really. I don't work for the government, and I don't work for a major corporation. But what that does is it makes me unbiased. I don't have an axe to grind anywhere. What my interest is in the best for the nation and the world, with the space transportation capabilities that we put together in the 60s and 70s. And I
Why
think
go to
this-
space anyway? I mean, people are going to say, why spend all that money? We got poverty on Earth. We got all these problems down here. We got Bosnia. We got Somalia. We got trouble. Why should we spend millions and billions of dollars to get into space in the unknown, Buzz?
Well, there are a lot of trivial reasons. You could say because it's there, because we've demonstrated a capability to use man's capabilities and understanding of technology. There's communications in space. There's the potential of beaming energy from solar power. And if anything's going to approach the world in the next 20, 40 years, it's liable to be an energy shortage, especially in Asia, where they're liable to burn soft coal and pollute a good bit of the rest of the world, unless some energy form that's more acceptable than coal or fossil fuel or radioactive nuclear reactors.
Should we go to Mars?
I think we should. I think it's our destiny. I think when we do go, however, we should be careful and prudent about it so that when we do go once, twice, 3 times, we don't say, well, that's enough, and pull back all of the resources, but build up a gradual, progressive capability.
If America was committed today to go to Mars, how long would it take to get there, Buzz?
15 years. I think we really should go back to the moon first, and we should do it internationally. There is a good rocket that could help us both go back to the moon and on to Mars, but it's a Russian rocket, and there's a great reluctance on the part of our corporations to be a part of using Russian hardware. It would take us quite a while, maybe 6, 8 years to duplicate that, but if we committed ourselves to have something that's even better than that Energia rocket and more cost-effective, reusable, then I think we could make use of that resource that's available, because our companies would know that they have a piece of the action that's going to follow on and do even bigger and better things.
Buzz, let me go back to you as a fighter pilot. You were a fighter pilot in the Korean War, right?
Right.
What are the personal traits? What characteristics does it take to fly a fighter plane, and how does that transfer into flying a spaceship?
Well, some people who were really great fighter pilots wrote a book called No Guts, No Glory. I think you have to have determination, you have to have a confidence, you have to have an understanding of your machine. You need to become a part of it, and it becomes a part of you. And then you work together as a team with the other members of your flight and communicate freely and understand what the ground controllers have to offer. And I think you have to look for opportunities and aggressively pursue them.
In combat, are you afraid or are you not afraid?
I think you're more afraid because there's more unknowns in combat than the tasks that we were assigned to carry out in the space program and in Apollo. We knew what we were doing, and there weren't that many unknowns. A few little funnies came along and abnormalities, but there were so many people available to handle them. You really don't fear situations like that. You fear making a mistake and not living up to your own expectations and what other people expect of you. In combat, it's quite a bit different. There's a lot more loneliness, a lot more need for individual courage and perseverance.
Do you remember any time you were afraid?
Well, I try and walk through those
You wake up
fearful
at night with the
situations.
sweats?
There were one in particular, terse situation over in Korea, where I was mighty glad once I was headed back home and there wasn't anybody on my tail.
When you landed, you were the pilot of the Eagle, right? The ship that landed on the moon?
Well, that was the name that my crew position had, the lunar module pilot. In fact, the commander of the mission, Neil Armstrong, was the commander of the lunar module. So if there was any manual controlling or any directing of that, it was going to be done by the commander. And that was
How come we don't hear much from Neil Armstrong? Whatever happened to him? I mean, he seems pretty quiet. Did something...
Well, he seems to be concentrating more on the aviation heritage that he so proudly has. He was an outstanding Navy pilot, and then NACA, National Committee for Aeronautics, and he flew the X-15. He managed to get out of some pretty remarkable adverse situations, X-15, and also with the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle. Of course, he flew in the Gemini 8 mission, and they had a stuck-on thruster that gave him real fits, and they had to abort and come down early. So he's had to face some really adverse situations.
Buzz, stay with us. We're going to take a break here. We are talking to futurist and a great American, Buzz Aldrin. We'll be right back after these messages.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Loud and clear now, Mike, and we understand that you are Doc.
Buzz, in television, you can hear the floor manager count you down when you're coming out of a commercial break. They're going 5, 4, 3. Does that bring back any memories to you?
Well, at least they're counting in the right direction.
I want to read something. Well, first of all, I picked up People magazine. I don't know why I picked this one up. It has Brides of the Year. I don't know how you got into this one, Buzz. There's a wonderful picture. Can you see this? Can you folks see it? There's a wonderful picture of Buzz Aldrin in there.
Tell me about it. What am I doing?
Actually, you're fine. There's an American flag behind you. You're in uniform. Do you wear your uniform very often?
Not very often. I did shortly after I retired, just to sort of make a statement that how proud I was from the service. I'm not wearing it quite as much these days, but when there's an opportunity to maybe have a little tongue-in-cheek and at least show the uniform and the flag and that I still fit into the uniform, I take advantage of it.
Buzz, how old are you now?
2 to the 6th.
Okay, now let me ask you.
You know what that means?
No.
64.
64. Okay, let me ask you this. If they ask you to go back and fight tomorrow, would you?
Fight?
Yeah, if
fight
you had
who?
to go into a military situation, like these young pilots.
Well, an awful lot has changed. It's gotten, I hate to say it, more like being real responsive to video games. Fast reflexes are needed, a great ability to assimilate an awful lot of information. Didn't quite the same as the F-86 days and the F-100 days.
Those were more dependent on reflexes in a different way, or what?
Well, maybe so. It just, time marches on. The airplanes are so much higher performance now, and I'm sure a much greater reliability. And the battle tactics have a lot more continuity. There's a lot more total information available, not only to the crew member, but to the people who are directing situations on the ground.
If that's the case, how can they have so many friendly fire accidents, Buzz? I mean, those choppers got shot down over there. I mean, how can that happen?
That's just so regrettable. Well, those things happen, just like the Challenger accident. You just don't want to see those things come along, but they do. That's the human element in design and confidence and inspection and execution. People make mistakes. So do machines.
Should we
fail
put
from time to
civilians?
time.
Should we let civilians like Krista McAuliffe go up?
Oh, I think so. Without a doubt. This space program belongs to the American people. It always has. And as soon as we have the room, we ought to be able to take up people and expose them and let them come back and tell the rest of the world from their perspective, not being a fine-tuned test pilot or an egghead academician like me who has combat experience also. We need the poets, we need the philosophers, we need journalists. We
Buzz,
need...
the American people are listening to this. We're on a network called America Talking. Might as well be called America Listening, too, because people do listen to it. Tell the American people what needs to be done. Give me a 1 through 5 on what needs to be done in the space program today.
We've led the people and the Congress to expect great things. Apollo certainly accomplished great things, but then we defined a space shuttle system that because of trying to put a cockpit in the booster, we overpriced ourselves out of a wonderful, fully reusable system into something that was a bit of a compromise and just hasn't lived up to expectations. Then we defined a space station and finally got the president to approve it, and that has been something that has also not lived up to our expectations. The National Aerospace Plane, it was going to take off from a runway and fly all the way into orbit. That has not lived up to expectations. We just better not do that again, even though we'd like to promise the world in a single-stage, fully reusable system. If that gets developed, it should be done, I think, with private investment, private money, and government encouragement. What I favor is fully reusable, but two-stage. Let's have ruggedness and plenty of margin and deal with things that we understand fully, that have off-the-shelf materials and engines. We could design a fully reusable liquid rocket first stage and replace those solid rockets on the shuttle.
Why aren't we doing that, Buzz?
Because people, for some reason, want to maybe promise more than we can.
But we're not promising and we're not delivering these days. The space program is kind of on the back burner, isn't it?
Well, we've started out defining a presence in orbit for America, and we've got to carry through with that. The space station isn't exactly the way I would want it done, but we've gone so far on it, we should follow through with the cooperative efforts that have been defined. I would like to have seen a more refurbishment of the present Russian station and have two stations that can join together and separate apart. But we've chosen not to do that, so that time has passed. Let's get on with the space station we have right now, but let's not overspend our resources so that we can't invest in the future and define just what that next generation shuttle is going to be. And I think we can approach it in stages, and I think those stages can also be very useful for return to the moon capabilities when and if that situation comes along for America to participate. I know the Europeans are trying to define how they're going to get to the moon, and I'm sure the Japanese and the Chinese will be coming along with their human space programs by around the turn of the century, and they're planning on lunar activities.
Is America going to end up behind the 8-ball in space, yes or no? I've got to go to a break.
Well, we could.
We could?
We could.
Okay. More with Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin when we come back. We're back with a man who has the admiration of Americans, Apollo 11 astronaut and futurist Buzz Aldrin. He's down in Washington, and I'm in Fort Lee, New Jersey at America's Talking. Buzz, I'm going to read one. I want to read one of these sentences from this thing, or two sentences that was faxed up to me. I guess you co-wrote this. I went to the Wall Street Journal or someplace. For mankind, it was a giant leap for a species that had evolved from the Stone Age to create the sophisticated rockets and spacecraft that made a moon landing possible. For one crowning moment, we were creatures of the cosmic ocean, a moment that 1,000 years hence may be seen as the signature of our century. I think that pretty well sums it up. Have we lost that kind of feeling and pride about the space program in America?
Well, I tried to get across that we have sure come a long ways, and I think it's going to be appreciated. We may be too close to it. I don't know as we've lost the way. What we defined through the president back in 1961 was a response to a perceived challenge by the Soviets of our technical prowess. They had nuclear weapons, and they demonstrated an ability to deliver those. And I think our response by defining a peaceful program of a great advanced technology, one that would bring us great pride and sense of achievement, certainly accomplished those objectives. And even though we left a plaque that said we came in peace for all mankind, that may imply to a large number of people that, yes, we did our program out in the open and broadcast everything that happened, the ups and the downs, the successes and the failures. But I think even more than that, the success that we achieved by demonstrating our ability to carry through with a commitment on budget and on time had to be a bitter disappointment to the Soviets, and I'm sure that it will be appreciated more and more that that was the beginning of the cracking apart of the Soviet Empire, which was further widened by the arms buildup that our president declared, and also by saying that if we're being intimidated by offensive missiles and potentially being blackmailed, that we would provide a defense against that through strategic means. Now, if we had not succeeded in going to the moon as successfully as we had, I'm sure other people would have said, oh, well, we don't believe you'll ever do that. That sounds impossible to us. Well, so did going to the moon sound impossible. Anyway, all these steps, I think, have brought the world to a position where we're not in a big confrontation anymore. We've got lots of little fires, and maybe in some respects that's even more dangerous.
Buzz, if you could talk to the President of the United States and tell him one or two things about the space program, and you only had 1 minute and a receiving line, but you knew he was going to listen, what would you say to him?
Let's get on with that station, keep the shuttle flying. Let's make it safe by putting liquid reusable boosters on it, because with adequate margin, those liquid reusable boosters will become the building block of the future. By themselves, they'll put a new replacement to the shuttle, upper stage, second stage into orbit, and we'll have a far more economical system, and it'll build us a much better future.
Is the investment in space worth it, Buzz, yes or no?
Without a doubt, yes it is.
All right.
Absolutely.
Now, there's a theme in tonight's program, that is running through it, because in some ways the space program was about peace. And later coming up is Mary Travers of Peter, Paul, and Mary. I'm sure you've heard that group.
Yes.
Mary said to ask me in the green room to ask you if you read Edgar Rice Burroughs when you were a kid, who was a science fiction writer.
Well, I read a little bit of science fiction. I can't remember reading his material, however.
Okay. Well, is that what turned you on to wanting to be a fighter pilot or wanting to be in the military, or?
No, I don't think so. I think it was my father's
Your dad was in
flying early on and being an aviation pioneer.
Did he put so much pressure on you that when you came back from the moon, you went through all those personal problems? Was that his fault or was that your fault?
No, absolutely, that was not his fault. He made a suggestion here or there. Sometimes I followed those suggestions. I had great respect for him, but I had my own life to live. I think I had traits that I inherited from both parents that were fostered and enhanced by my perfectionism, my sense of overachieving, and sooner or later I was going to have some problems dealing with life, and the being propelled into celebrity status and put on a pedestal enhanced and brought about, accelerated the onset of things that made me begin to question what life was all about and where was I going.
Did you start drinking too much in the military and then it just get away from you, or?
No, I think that was after I left the military. As long as I was with NASA and with the military, I had a very structured life. Once I chose to leave that and to write a story about some of my experiences, that structure in life began to vanish. And just like so many others, whether it's in the entertainment business or in the part-time business, when you're not quite so structured, things can begin to slip by the wayside. But I feel that the challenge that provided for me, one of dealing with that, coming to grips with whatever it was, and then changing, growing through that, has given me an opportunity that my contemporaries never had. I've been able to chart a new course, and now with 15 years sobriety, I'm a far more comfortable, confident person, creative, and I'm relaxed. I enjoy life a lot more. It doesn't mean that from time to time, a few things don't bug me. I'm just as human as the other person. But I think I enjoy life, and I found a wonderful, lovely wife, and we complement each other, and we just enjoy going through life together.
Buzz, you're a great American, and I was very pleased you were on the show here today, and I wish you all the best. What are you up to? You're going to keep trying to make your voice heard on this space program, I hope.
Well, yes, but I've shifted gears now. I've embarked on a science fiction career with a wonderful writer, and we have a novel and a publisher, Warner Books, and the manuscript is due the end of the year, and it'll be published the fall of '95, and it's just thrilling and fantastic. It's about another civilization elsewhere that faced a catastrophe in some ways similar to Shoemaker-Levy, except maybe 1,000 times larger.
I got to interrupt, Buzz, because we're going to a hard break. Yes or no? Are there other people out there in the outer space that we don't know about yet?
I think so.
Okay. Thank you very much, Buzz Aldrin. Good luck to you.